Hey everyone, I wanted to make a video about a Halo Wars 2 beginner's guide. I've had a lot of people recently reach out and request this sort of a thing on the channel, so I'm going to do the best that I can of what I know of Halo Wars 2 to help you be better at the game. And I guess I should set the expectations of who this video is directed for. And this is mostly directed for the people who have just picked up the game, those who have tried a few multiplayer matches and are frustrated that they keep losing, and those really trying to see if they can learn something new about the strategies they have in Halo Wars 2. This type of video is not directed to those who have a lot of experience in the game or the pro players in this game, because I already know they're going to be upset just even the thought of the title of this video. So I wanted to let you know that this is directed to beginners, hence the title of the video. This video is going to focus on the UNSC and the general faction that they offer. There are 8 heroes or leaders in the UNSC. There are 4 base heroes: Captain Cutter, Isabel, Professor Anders, and Sergeant Forge. DLC leaders that are included either in the Complete Edition or the Season Pass is Kinsano, Sergeant Johnson, Commander Jerome, and Serena. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to play as Captain Cutter, since he's one of the leaders that everyone gets in the game. Now, if a lot of people really enjoy this type of a video and learn a lot from this, I could expand this series onto covering each individual leader, but just for today, this is going to apply to all UNSC leaders. This is going to be more general information for the UNSC faction. Now, as soon as the game loads up, the first thing I recommend you do is build a supply pad. The reason why you want to build a supply pad is this is what you use to train your units. Next, while that supply pad is building, usually on any map you're playing on, there's going to be blue supply crates nearby, and I recommend you choose one of your starting Marine squads to go gather those. The other Marine squad, you can look on the map and find out where there are power crates. And usually there's 3 or 4 locations around the map to where you can find some power crates. I recommend you go send a Marine squad to the furthest power crates. Once our supply pad is done, you're going to still have 400 power. So I recommend that you immediately upgrade that to a heavy supply pad. And now we can start building a generator. The order I recommend that you start out is supply pad, generator, supply pad, and then your 5th one be a generator. But if you're going to be doing some tactics early on in the game, such as a rush or a leader build, that won't apply to you. That's really just a general build that I recommend. So we'll build a supply pad for our 3rd pad. And be sure to keep an eye on your starting Marines. It's really important that you gather your starting crates, because not only does this help you out, but this prevents your opponent from getting an advantage from you on the economy. You're also, when you load up the game, you're going to get a leader point right away. And it really depends on whatever leader that you have chosen for the match to what you should select. Personally, for Captain Cutter, UNSC Raid is better than Battle Hardened. Once we have 300 power, you're going to want to immediately upgrade your generator. For the sake of this video, things are going a little bit slower than usual, but this is just to give you an idea of what you should do. I also recommend that it's really important that you start taking some of your mini bases nearby. Mini bases not only give you an extra pad that is really low cost, but you can use this to your advantage to train additional units or increase your economy. I'm going to put my armory here on this pad. I also want to encourage you to never build a generator on your mini base. The reason being is mini bases don't have as much protection as your regular base. So generators have an increase the more generators you build. The first generator is 200 supplies, I believe, and then the second one is 500, and then it's 800, so on and so forth. You don't want to put 1100 supplies or 800 supplies on a generator that someone can take out pretty easily. I'm going to finish building out our generator here. And if you get some extra supplies once you start building your generator. You can start spending that on things such as infantry or jackrabbit. It's really, really important in Halo Wars to take the power nodes. So I recommend you either set your rally point near there or send some of your starting Marines. We can actually see our opponent here scouting us out. It's a great reminder that in Halo Wars, it doesn't happen quite as often as it did in Halo Wars 1, but it's really important that you scout your opponent so you can get an understanding of what they're building, so you can get a heads up if they're rushing you or something. Now the nodes give you, I believe it's 1.5 power per second. It may not seem like a lot, but if you control a node for 10 or 15 minutes, that power is really going to add up. It's also important that you build turrets. This is a cheap and effective way to protect your base when your troops aren't at your main base. And if you're cheap on the supplies, the best way actually to cover the entire area around your base is to build your turrets diagonally. So you build one turret in the front of one slot and the back on diagonally across. So if you were to build a turret in this top left, then you build the other one at the bottom right. Let's talk about the general strengths of the UNSC faction. They have better turrets than the Banished. The Banished turrets fire a lot slower than the UNSC turrets, and they're generally just not as good. Also, the UNSC has a siege turret, which is great because that can protect your base, or even be a little bit of an offensive turret, depending on how small the map is, and it doesn't consume any population. Marines and snipers are actually really great units. What's really awesome about the Marines is when you upgrade them all the way, they have their first upgrade, which is grenade throw, and then a second one called combat tech. And what combat tech does is it gives the Marines rocket launcher upgrades, so they shoot rockets automatically. And on top of that, they can heal anything mechanical. So this is your base, these are other vehicles, even Hornets. They almost act as Nightingales. The only thing they don't heal is other infantry. So if you're kind of lacking on the supplies and you need something that'll heal units, combat tech Marines are great. Another strength the UNSC has is that their vultures are still kind of OP at this point. The vultures, they're just so good. They were nerfed a little bit in this patch, but they are still one of the best units in the game. Now that we're in Tech 2, you can start doing some of the things that, if you're not rushing, you can transition into what's called the mid-game. I actually really enjoy going vehicles mid-game, particularly Warthogs when I'm playing as UNSC, but this is really up to your playstyle. You really should have scouted your opponent by now. I'll send my Jackrabbit over there to really get an understanding of what we're dealing with here. Once you get to second tech, it's probably best that you start expanding your base. So this is grabbing a second base. You should be pretty strategic on where you choose this. Some people can be pretty bold and try to grab an expansion on their opponent's side of the map to kind of have a win-win where they take an expo and kind of takes away an expansion base from their opponents. But this is kind of tricky and it doesn't usually work out, so I would just recommend you take the nearest expansion base. Now, one thing you should know about Halo Wars is Halo Wars, generally speaking, most of the time, is a numbers game. What I mean by this is that if you have more units than your opponent, you generally are going to win, even if your opponent has more upgrades. It's not always the case in Halo Wars 2, but generally speaking, it is. Oh dear, look at this. There's quite a lot here. Looks like he went Warthogs as well, this AI. Also, as your base expands, it's going to be really important that you make sure you upgrade your supply pads and any additional generators that you build. It may seem that the 200 power is not worth it, but it really, really is. Also, if you're considering whether you should make more production buildings, such as more air pads, barracks, or garages, it's actually probably more beneficial to make more economy buildings, such as supply pads and generators. The reason being is you're not going to be utilizing the production buildings all the time, especially if you have multiple of them, so you're really just kind of missing out on some additional resources. As you build out your army and you start getting into the later stages of the game, you may be wondering, what are some of the best ways to fill out your army composition? And I think it's really important that you go for expanding your population counter, because that's critical. And you also need to see what works best for your leader. There really is no definitive upgrade path that you should do when you're building out your army, or what particular kind of unit you should build a lot of for your army. It actually really depends on the match, your leaders, your allies' leaders, and your opponent's leaders. Generally speaking, as the game progresses, you're going to want to move more away from counter infantry for the UNSC, such as the Cyclops, the Sniper, and the Hellbringers. Generally speaking, one of the weaknesses of the UNSC is they do not have very good counter units. One of the exceptions is Cutter's Cyclops drop, where it drops a Vet 2 Cyclops on the battlefield. That is extremely, extremely good of a power. If you want to ask me what vehicles I recommend you build as the UNSC as you get to more in the late game, even though a lot of people disagree, I personally really enjoy using Scorpions. I think they're a great unit overall. Mixing them with Wolverines and Nightingales is a really strong army composition. And Hornets are excellent as well. When you upgrade them to Wingmen here and get your air upgrades all set and build quite a few bit of Hornets, it's a really annoying but effective way to have a strong attack force. It'd probably be best to also go over some of the weaknesses for the UNSC faction. They don't have any shield generators on their base turrets, so it's not going to protect the brunt of an attack like how the Banished have. They also can't cloak their bases like how the Banished does. You can end up actually cloaking your base as UNSC if you opt to build some Nightingales and use their special cloak ability on your base. That will heal the base, but that's only a temporary solution. The UNSC counter units are also not as good as their Banished counterparts. So the Hellbringers, the Snipers, and the Cyclops, while the Snipers are really good, the Hellbringers are not as good as the Banished Elite Rangers, and the Cyclopses are not as good as the Banished Hunters. These two units in particular in the Banished faction are much better on their specialty than the UNSC. Lastly, I really don't recommend building a Condor as UNSC. It's just not as good as the Scarab. It's pretty slow. It's really susceptible to a lot of attacks, and it just doesn't perform as well as the Scarab. And quite honestly, there's a lot that you can do with the 40 population that is spent on the Condor. Also, it's important to keep in mind the air upgrades, air level 1, 2, and 3, that boost the damage and the health of air units. That does not apply to the Condor. All in all, I think that's really the high points of how to play as the UNSC. Again, make sure that you're always doing something. It's important that you're either getting upgrades, going on an attack, even preparing for a counterattack that your opponent may be doing. Getting map control is imperative. That it really is important that you take all of the nodes and mini bases and just be aggressive, and don't be afraid to retreat and kind of rebuild. I always make fun of people that do that online, but if you have a big army that you know you're going to lose, if you don't have the economy to support a counterattack, then it may be best to turn around and regroup and try your attack again. Let me know if this video was helpful for you. I tried my best. There is quite a lot to learn about Halo Wars 2, especially if you're first starting out, but I can get a little bit more specific with individual leaders as this series progresses. I'm going to be doing a Banished version of this guide, so let me know your feedback in the comments down below. And I'll post a link to that Banished video when it goes live in the description. There's also going to be a playlist for these types of tutorials for you to check out, so if more videos get added in the future, you can see those there. And finally, if you have more questions, if you're still confused on Halo Wars, feel free to join our Discord server, where we have a lot of people of all types of skill levels in Halo Wars that would love to help you out and enjoy the game. Alright, that does it for me. Thanks for watching, everybody. And I'll see you, James.